Dolphins fans, we're still celebrating that win against the Raiders, and it's the second straight win for the Miami Dolphins. But we do have some news to talk about. Mike McDaniel spoke to some reporters after the win and dropped some nuggets on Isaiah Wynn, Raheem Mostert, and possibly Bradley Chubb. And the Dolphins did get good news after this win as well on Isaiah Wynn, which we'll get to in just a second, but on the ball club as well, because guess what, folks? There are no injuries coming out of this win against the Raiders. Now, there are players banged up, obviously, that were injured going into the game. They're still going to be a little bit banged up. But the positive news is this, is that you did not suffer any new injuries yesterday. And that is the first time that we've been able to say that for quite a while. It feels like everybody, at least one big player on this team, has always had a minor injury coming out of a game, but nothing new to Tyreek, Jalen Ramsey, Tua, Achane, Armstead, nothing. And all you have to do is worry about the injuries that are already been sustained, like a Kendall Fuller or anything like that. So it's great news that Miami is relatively healthy coming out of this game against the Raiders, a game that needed to be won. And make sure you do hit that thumbs up icon to show me you're fired up, because I'm fired up. It's Victory Monday. The video we put out earlier, we spammed those W's in the comment section. Now, let's hit that thumbs up icon if you're fired up about the second straight win by this Dolphins ball club. All right, let's get into another piece of good news for the Miami Dolphins, and it does revolve around Isaiah Wynn. Remember, Wynn has been on the PUP list the entire season, but had his practice window opened up later last week, where he now has 21 days to be activated to this roster. Recovering from a knee/quad injury, was the projected starting left guard on this offensive line coming into the season, but Robert Jones has filled in relatively okay as Wynn has been out. And McDaniel said there's no setbacks. He looks good, and there might be a possibility that he gets activated later this week before the game against his former squad in the New England Patriots. But the question is on Isaiah Wynn, what will his role be on this Dolphins football team when he does get activated back to the roster? Because when you currently look at this Dolphins offensive line, this is where we stand. Austin Jackson's on IR for the rest of the season, and this is your starting group. And they played pretty well this past week in terms of pass blocking against the Raiders. Run blocking's a different story. But you look at Lamb, who's your right tackle. Paul's your depth left tackle between Armstead. But obviously Wynn is now your left guard, right guard kind of depth piece alongside Lester Cotton, and I wouldn't really look into Andrew Meyer too often here. The UDFA has been inactive for every single game. The question is, will he be able to take over for Robert Jones at left guard, which was the projected result of the Wynn role coming into the season? Well, Robert Jones has had a very much of a roller coaster season. He started off really, really bad against the Jaguars and Buffalo Bills, but then he had a 3-week stretch against the Patriots, the Colts, the Cardinals, where he looked really, really good, but he's really struggled as of late, and you see the numbers against the Raiders. He was not good this past week against Las Vegas. The PFF grades were atrocious for Robert Jones, and it was really like that in Week 10 against the Rams, too, before he left halfway through that game due to injury and Lester Cotton filled in. And when you look at Robert Jones for the entire season, it's not like he's some special left guard. He's been average at best. You see the PFF grades. He's allowed 4 sacks. I do give Robert Jones a little bit of credit. He has not been the most penalized player out there, only 2 penalties through the season so far. But the issue I have with Robert Jones is actually in the pass blocking department. And we've seen him in some big-time matchups get absolutely abused. The second time around against Buffalo wasn't perfect, but he at least held his own. That game against the Bills in Week 2, where Tua got concussed and it was a disaster on Thursday Night Football, Robert Jones had a PFF pass blocking grade of 19. He got abused by Ed Oliver. And I will say this, when it comes to Isaiah Wynn and Robert Jones right now, I am not going to immediately put Isaiah Wynn at the starting left guard spot right away. I'm not benching Robert Jones. He's been here all year. He's been relatively healthy, and he's been at least below average to average if you're talking about him. But I mentioned he was really good in that 3-week stretch of Week 5, Week 7, and Week 8 against the Patriots, Colts, and Cardinals. The past 3 weeks, Bills, Rams, Raiders, it has not been that good, and you're seeing the trajectory of the roller coaster go from the top all the way to the bottom after starting at the bottom in the first month of the season. And if he continues to go down and doesn't go back up, well, then we will have to have a conversation about moving Wynn into that starting left guard role because you signed him to be your starting left guard last year, and he had to leave the season early after only 7 games, and then obviously has been out the remainder of this season so far. But let me know, before we transition to some other news around the Miami Dolphins, if you had to pick a left guard to start moving forward, would you go back to Isaiah Wynn, type your IWs, or would you stick with Robert Jones, type your RJs? All right, Mike McDaniel was asked about other players potentially returning to practice off the PUP list or IR for the Miami Dolphins. And McDaniel responded, says, we do have some guys approaching their readiness, a lot of TBD. And you have to take this with a grain of salt, because could the answer be referred to people who have had their practice window open, like Patrick McMorris, like Isaiah Wynn, like potentially Blake Ferguson, to be activated the active roster? Or is he talking about players to actually have their practice window open in basically regards to Bradley Chubb, who we're waiting for? I am not so sure this refers to Bradley Chubb, but obviously the projected number 1 edge rusher for the Miami Dolphins this season, now that Jaelan Phillips is out for the year with his injury, still remains on the PUP list. And it's curious to see if Chubb will be the player next opened up on the practice window. I have some thoughts on when Chubb is actually going to return in just a second, but we do have to show some love to our sponsor that got me feeling nicey, and that is Mando. And make sure I am the best smelling person in the room at all times. Mando is a whole body deodorant, safe to use anywhere on your body. Pits, balls, thigh folds, belly buttons, butt cracks, feet, doesn't matter. Mando will have you covered, and their starter pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice like mini body wash and deodorant wipes, and free shipping. And I got a couple products in studio with me today to make sure I'm smelling all good. I mentioned some of those other mini options you could bring around. Deodorant wipes right here, mini body wash right here, perfect for on-the-go travel. Deodorant wipes work perfectly if you pick up an unexpected sweat while you're out in public. Just use those little wipes, make sure you're feeling good. The mini body wash is perfect for when you're on the travel. I'm going home for Thanksgiving next week. I'm going to have my Mando mini body wash with me at all times. And I want to make sure the real ones here at Dolphins Today are hooked up. As a special offer for our listeners, new customers get $5 off a starter pack with our exclusive code. That code is CHAT. It equates to over 40% off your starter pack when you use code CHAT at shopmando.com. shopmando.com. Use code CHAT to get $5 off the starter pack. Remember, it equates to over 40% off that starter pack. Please support our show and our sponsor in Mando and tell them we sent you. Smell fresher, stay drier, and boost your confidence from head to toe with Mando. All right, let's get over to Bradley Chubb and talk about him potentially returning, because I don't think it's going to happen this month. When you think about the rest of the month for the Miami Dolphins, you have Week 12 this Sunday against the New England Patriots, and then you have a quick turnaround on Thursday Night Football, Thanksgiving, against the Green Bay Packers on the road. I would not anticipate Bradley Chubb being ready for any of these 2 games, especially since you'd have to have his practice window open, look good in practice, gain the trust of the coaching staff before he gets put back out there. So if you do think Chubb is going to return, it's likely going to come in December, if at all, this season. And that makes me feel okay, especially with Chop Robinson, your first-round pick out of Penn State, starting to play unbelievable. And I can't really say starting to play anymore, because we now have a month sample size of Chop Robinson being unbelievable. He's an emerging star on this Dolphins defense, and he had another great game against the Raiders this past Sunday. 6 pressures. Didn't get a sack, but got after Gardner Minshew 6 times, and had a 34.8 win percent rate on his pass rushes. 34.8. That is absolutely ridiculous. And I talked about the emergence over the last 4 games. It's a tale of 2 players. The first 6 games of the season, Chop Robinson looked like an absolute bust. And I talked about how disappointing it was to see Chop go out there, provide you with nothing in the pass rush department. And we know he's not going to provide you a lot in the run-stopping department either, but he is getting a little bit better at that as well. And maybe I was a little quick to judge the rookie. He's really young. He wasn't the most productive at Penn State either, but you see the raw athleticism and tape and how he can be a elite. Well, it's starting to peek through in the NFL because in the last 4 games, he has 18 pressures, a pair of sacks, 2 QB hits, and a very nice pass rushing grade of 69.9. Chop Robinson has turned around his rookie season, and it's been absolutely awesome to watch. It's made this Dolphins defense slightly better over the past 2 or 3 weeks as well. Remember, folks, the Dolphins had 1 sack in a 3-week span against the Colts, against the Cardinals, and the Bills. 1 sack. That 1 sack was Chop Robinson against Josh Allen in the fourth quarter, but lately they've been on fire. They had 3 sacks against the Raiders, 4 sacks against the Rams. So they've now had 7 sacks in the last 2 weeks. Chop Robinson is helping get pressure off the edge, making quarterbacks be cognizant of him, stepping up in the pocket where Zach Sealer, Calais Campbell, and Emmanuel Ogbah have been waiting. Chop Robinson has really turned around this front 4 and pass rush of Miami, and it's been absolutely awesome to watch. There's still some things that need to be improved on the back end of this Dolphins defense in terms of tackling and actually bringing the quarterbacks down. There's no question about that. But Chop Robinson finally getting after quarterbacks, well, it's made me feel easy and a lot more confident in this pass rush with Bradley Chubb remaining to be out. We got one more thing to discuss here in terms of injury news, but make sure you are subscribed because we're going to cover the Miami Dolphins every single day, all year long. Sometimes dropping 2 videos a day, like today, weekly live shows as well. We'll be live again tomorrow for a weekly live show on Tuesday, and then on Sunday against the Patriots. So hit that sub button and join us here at Dolphins Today. All right, last piece of positive injury news for the Miami Dolphins comes around Raheem Mostert, who left for a couple snaps in the first half against the Raiders with a hip injury. He ultimately did return, and McDaniel said that the injury news on Mostert remains pretty positive on that hip. But when asked about was it the reason he didn't get a lot of snaps, he just said that Devon Achane's play warranted extra snaps for him personally. But I'm not so sure I buy into that because Raheem Mostert's snaps have gone like almost Robert Jones' season from up here to all the way down here. Over the past 3 weeks, he's been relatively phased out of the offense. Only 14 snaps against Buffalo, 8 against the Rams on Monday Night Football, and then only 10 yesterday against the Raiders. Meanwhile, in the beginning of the season, he was getting 25-plus snaps consistently every single game. He just has not been on the field as often for the Miami Dolphins offense. And some of that is because they're giving Devon Achane more work, but it also is because Jalen Wright is starting to creep into this backfield a little bit. Look at the shift in snaps for the Dolphins offense at the running back position over the last 3 weeks, going back to that game against Buffalo. Achane is consistently your RB1, getting more than 60% of the snaps on the offensive side. And he deserves all of those snaps as well because he has been absolutely phenomenal in the run game, in the pass game, and he has been a top 3, top 5 back in all football this year. He is as dual threat as it gets. But Jalen Wright, look at that right there. 9 snaps against Buffalo, 9 snaps against the Rams, and then this week against the Raiders, 18 snaps, starting to outsnap Raheem Mostert in back-to-back weeks here. It looks like Jalen Wright is becoming RB2 for this Dolphins football team, something that I have pined for quite a while. Now, with that being said, the numbers for Jalen Wright over the past 3 weeks have not been that good, and we'll showcase what that looks like in just a second. But before we do that, I want to get your thoughts down below. Pick an RB2 for the Miami Dolphins. Is it Jalen Wright? Type JW. If you think it should be Raheem Mostert, type those RMs. Well, before I show you the numbers, if we're going to be honest, over the past 3 weeks, both of those running backs have been kind of ineffective. Devon Achane is really the only one that is consistently able to move the football for this Dolphins football team. Now, the offensive line has struggled in the run blocking department against the Rams and Raiders over the past 10 days. Now, they did really well against the Buffalo Bills, and they did well against the Cardinals in the previous couple weeks there, but they struggled over the last 2 weeks. Alec Ingold has been out. That could be a major reason why the run game hasn't been as effective. But when you look at the RB2 battle between Jalen Wright and Mostert over the past 3 weeks, where we've documented the shift in snaps, well, it doesn't look so good for Jalen Wright because he's only averaging 1.5 yards per carry while Mostert's averaging 4.1. Now, I will say the interesting thing on Mostert here, he had 2 carries against the Raiders yesterday. -3 yards. He didn't have a single carry in the 8 snaps he had against the Rams, but he has been effective in the passing game. 4 receptions for 66 yards over the past 3 weeks, while Jalen Wright really hasn't gotten the passing game whatsoever. The reason why I think Raheem Mostert's snaps are kind of dwindling here is because of his fumbling issues. Jalen Wright, for being a rookie, has done an excellent job of running with physicality and a burst of speed and athleticism when there are holes on that offensive line, but he also does a great job of taking care of the football. Raheem Mostert has 2 critical fumbles this year that I would argue costed the Miami Dolphins 2 football games. In Week 7 against the Colts, coming out of the half, up 10-3, he fumbles at their own 28. The Colts 4 plays later, tie the game up at 10, and you lose that game. If Mostert doesn't fumble, you possibly win that game. Against the Buffalo Bills 2 weeks ago, what happened in the beginning of the 3rd quarter? He fumbled when you're up, you're driving, Bills go right down the field, and they have the momentum for the rest of the game. If Mostert didn't fumble those 2 snaps, I don't think we're having a conversation right now about who's RB2 on this football team. But Mostert, unfortunately, the veteran has had a fumbling issue this year. It's costed the Dolphins a pair of football games, which is why I think we're seeing more and more Jalen Wright in this Dolphins offense. But also with injuries, Mostert is kind of back there returning kicks alongside Malik Washington right now. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of Dolphins Today. Make sure you are subscribed. Like I said, we'll be live tomorrow for a weekly live show, and then we'll have you covered this entire week leading up to Week 12, where the Dolphins host the Patriots and finish up that matchup for the season with New England. They already won the first one in Foxborough. So hit that sub button. I'll see you tomorrow with a live show. Go Fins.